This video is about virtue ethics as a rhetorical strategy for thinking about what is the good. So virtue ethics is a little different than the other rhetorical strategies because the question here is not what should I do, but what kind of person am I? What kind of person should I be? So the fundamental moral task in virtue ethics is to become a virtuous and a flourishing person. And we do this by cultivating embodied virtues such as courage, humility, fidelity, honesty, compassion. It's a long list of these that are possible. And they depend on what your situation is in the world. We then determine right action by referencing those embodied moral characteristics and using discernment, or phronesis, which means practical wisdom, to evaluate a particular situation. We think about what are our virtues, what kind of people are we, and what would a person like me, what would a person with my virtues do in this particular situation, using discernment to notice all of the details and particulars of this situation. Although these are personally embodied virtues, it feels like a very individualistic sort of theory because these are embodied within us as an individual. They're really collectively chosen for us as a society. So even though they're embodied virtues, we shouldn't think of them as idiosyncratic or particularly unique. Because it's through our development, through our parenting, through our education, that we are mentored and disciplined into these virtues. So virtues are associated with a particular social role. There are certain virtues associated with being a parent, certain virtues associated with being a nurse, a teacher, etc. So some of the prominent philosophers in this theory are Aristotle, going way back, and then Edmund Pellegrino and some of his colleagues in medicine really did a lot of work to sort of reinvigorate virtue ethics, particularly in the context of professionals. Thinking about who should professionals be as people, right? That if we profess to something, that's what it means to be a professional. So we make a claim that we are the kind of people who can be trusted to ensure the public good. If we're going to profess that, then we need to be certain kinds of people. We need to embody certain characteristics. Pat Benner, who's a nurse, picked up on these issues, and we see that in her work From Novice to Expert. So since certain virtues are associated with particular social roles, then the first step when you're making a virtue ethics argument is to identify who the person is who you think is trying to figure out what the right thing to do is, and what's their role in this situation. Are they a healthcare provider? Are they a parent? Are they a sister? Are they a sibling? Are they a child? What are the virtues that are associated with that role? And then once we've named those virtues, we can begin to think about which ones are applicable in this situation. And then given the details of the situation, what kinds of actions do those virtues guide us to take? So virtues may be embodied within a particular person, but they are not inherent. We aren't born with these virtues. We learn the virtues throughout our lives. As children, we learn them from our parents and our teachers. And as professionals, we learn them from the educational system, but from our mentors and our colleagues. They are the ones who sort of watch us and say, no, let me encourage you to act in this other way. Or, yes, you're doing a great job. Keep doing that thing you're doing. Keep behaving in this way. And they articulate for us, I behave in this way because here's the virtue that's important to me. Here's what I think about what it means to be a nurse. And so because I have that virtue, I habitually act in this manner. So virtues are things that we are taught and that we then practice over time. And over time, it's the repetition of certain behaviors that become ingrained in us so that they become not only behaviors, but also the character traits that underlie the reasons for those behaviors. So the easy example is gratitude, right? So when we have small children, we teach them to say thank you. You're given a gift. Doesn't matter if you like the gift or not. Doesn't matter if you already have 3 of them at home. It doesn't matter if you explicitly said, I don't like My Little Ponies. Doesn't matter. You still say thank you, right? You express gratitude to the giver. Because even if you don't like the gift, you are grateful that they wanted to give you something. You acknowledge that they made an effort to do something for you, and you want to express gratitude for that. Right? So as children, we teach them to do that act. Right? And the model here is that over time, children come to learn that that act of saying thank you is associated with all those other ideas about appreciating that other person for having extended themselves. And that over time, that idea of gratitude becomes ingrained within the child, within the now adult, and is expanded to sort of a whole variety of areas in their life. And they don't have to think, oh, someone gave me a gift, I'm supposed to say thank you. They don't need to be reminded anymore. They don't have to think about that as a conscious act, but rather spontaneously, because they have this virtue, they will spontaneously express their gratitude. So, although this is a really appealing and frequently used model, we see people use this language of virtue ethics a lot, particularly in the political realm. We often hear politicians say, as Americans, we are the kind of people who are generous with our neighbors in a time of need. So if you listen to the press conferences after hurricanes, for example, after natural disasters, and they will often say, we as a people are generous. We come together at times like these and show our support for our neighbors, and we donate to the cause, and we make sure they have what they need, and we show up and we serve meals. And these are all acts of generosity. And, that's what makes America a great place, is because this is what we do. This is the kind of people we are. This is the kind of nation that we are. Right? So we use this language a lot. And it's a very stirring language because it really touches a lot of emotions. It's a very emotional language. Nonetheless, it's complicated because we live in a very heterogeneous society. And that means we have multiple roles. In Aristotle's day, it was a very clearly stratified, homogeneous society, and everybody knew their place. And each of those places in society had associated virtues. But in our society, we have lots of different roles. And there are times that those different roles, the virtues associated with those different roles, may conflict. Another problem that also goes along with that heterogeneity is that different groups in society may attribute different virtues to the same role. So the virtues of being a good parent, for example, can be really different from one group to another. How important is it to not only love your child, but also maintain strict discipline with your child, for example? For some parents, that element of requiring teaching responsibility is very important. For others, not so much. Another challenge of virtue ethics is it doesn't really offer specific guidance for action. We're supposed to just use our discernment to think about what our virtues are and then act. And it allows this space for, well, you're just a novice, right? You're not very good at this yet. You're just learning. And so we want to have systems where we are guided to the behaviors that go along with these virtues. And that's part of the role of mentors and colleagues in the educational system, is to sort of help us to understand what those behaviors are that go along with the virtues, so that when we reflect on the virtues, we can say, oh, these are the kinds of behaviors that go along with those virtues. But it's very much a model that says, but you have to look at each particular situation to know what the right action is. You have to use your discernment. So that can be difficult. It's also a model that requires intentional and effective mentoring. And so if you are someone who hasn't had that mentoring, or if as a profession we don't do a good job of that for novices who come into our profession, then the system breaks down. So, thinking about how this works. There are important social roles that have associated virtues. And those virtues can be learned, they can be practiced, and that we use discernment to determine what the right action is in any particular situation. Toward what action does the embodied virtue guide us? Thank you.